faced the sky. I can't carry you up this mountain. I can barely carry myself today. She plopped her pack on the ground and pulled out some water. Sit up and drink this. He did as told, saying nothing. She rubbed her belly, staring at the sky. He held his hand out to meet hers, letting it rest where he could sometimes feel it kick. She turned her eyes on him then, and he felt them petting him softly, pulling him into an embrace as full and real as the hug of a grandmother. He could smell fresh-baked cinnamon buns. My banger, she smiled, tracing a finger along the edge of his ear. Long time no see. But then she stiffened, the smell of cinnamon buns disappeared, and she looked down at her belly. Kodiak, meet your wasted daddy. I should say, Kodiak, they've named the unborn fetus after his favorite ski run, which is called Kodiak. And this is the kind of thing people do in Fernie, is name their unborn fetuses after their favorite ski runs. So I couldn't resist. It's true. It's a true story. Kodiak, meet your wasted daddy. He pulled his hand away. Real nice, Michael. Some real estate scouting trip this is turning out to be. He saw Janet's jaw working and heard the grinding of her teeth, always a good gauge of Janet's stress levels. She put her bare hands to her cheeks, massaging as if to force her jaw apart, and began nibbling lightly on her bottom lip. He imagined her biting a chunk off, gnawing at it, chewing until little strands of sinew stuck in her teeth, blood pooling at the corners of her mouth. He saw her biting again, slowly chewing off as much of her face as her teeth could reach. He closed his eyes to ward off the rush of nausea engulfing him. Don't do that, he tried to say, but he gagged on the words. So that's Michael. There's a fair amount of barfing in this book, I realized afterwards. It's quite bawdy, but Chaucer is bawdy too, and it's a real, so when I got this review that I should never talk about, I got all kinds of good reviews, and I always talk about the worst review I got that was hateful and mean and awful. It was in the Globe of Mail. Lucky me that my worst review was in the Globe of Mail. But the only nice, they always say it doesn't matter what kind of review you get as long as you can pull a pull quote and one nice thing that they say, and you can put that on the book. So the one nice thing that he said was inspired descriptions of vomit. That would look nice, inspired descriptions of vomit. I maybe won't put that on the book. I think I will stop there and we can have questions and discussion. Does anyone have questions? Things you want to talk about? Let me tell you about the Project Bookmark. Can I tell you about the other initiative? So Project Bookmark, Miranda Hill is a writer who just came out with her first short story collection called Sleeping Funny. She's also married to Lawrence Hill, who wrote the Book of Negroes, which everybody knows, I think. And she has this really cool project where, I'm going to find my little thing. Oh, I might have to. Where, so if there's a famous passage in a famous poem or novel that, sorry, I'm going to find this quickly. I'm trying to talk and do it at the same time. Project Bookmark Canada. If there's a famous passage in a book or poem that talks about a certain physical place, she has made these plaques called bookmarks in the place. So if someone talks about the Elk River, which nobody does, but that's the river where I live, and there would be a plaque where there would be a section from the poem or novel describing that river and inspired by that place, and it would be on a podium sort of statue in that place. You could stand there and look at the beautiful Elk River and then read this beautiful poem by Michael Andate, and I'm just making things up about the Elk River. So it's commemorating both the place that inspired the book and the book that marks the place, and there's these actual physical statues. So I think it's a beautiful idea, and so far there are 6, I think, across Canada, but she has this vision of having piles of them coast to coast. So you could go on a literary tour of Canada and go around and see all these places that inspired novels and see the part that they inspired and look at the place and kind of do the traveling book thing. And so she asked me to write something saying why I think this is a good idea. And I do, my books are very much inspired by places. The Canterbury Trail, the place is called Colton, but it's very obviously to everybody about Fernie. The Bone Cage is set at the Calgary campus, University of Calgary. And it's important, the place, and I'm going to read you a little bit thing about why. The way I think about books is deeply influenced by Robert Crouch's statement that Canadians have an invisibility complex, and that Canadian literature can work as the antidote. Crouch argued that too often Canadians do not see their own experiences reflected in the television they watch, the movies they see, or the literature they read. If we don't see ourselves reflected, how do we know we exist? I was reminded of this theory when I visited Thunder Bay on an early tour for my wrestling novel, The Bone Cage. I had already learned that the if you build it, they will come theory does not work for book events. Most writers must bring their own audience. The only person I knew in Thunder Bay was the Lakehead wrestling coach, so I bribed him into forcing his team to come. Anyone who cares enough about books to read this blog knows that this wonderful wrestling coach will be eternally rewarded for his response. He gave his entire men's squad permission to skip practice on the condition that they attend my reading. To this day, I still smile when I recall the librarians' confusion at the sight of their reading room filled with muscular, cauliflower-eared undergraduates. To be honest, I just wanted warm bodies instead of empty chairs at my reading. I didn't actually expect these grapplers to like the event. But as soon as I started reading, I could tell they were absolutely into it. I was talking about their people, their places, their preoccupations. I was holding up a mirror and saying, you exist. Your experience is worthy of representation. In an incredible coincidence, Lakehead Wrestling had done a recruiting push in Alberta the previous season. So most of the young men in my audience were from Calgary, the very place the Bone Cage is set. When I read a scene involving barefooted university students playing frisbee in the center square during a Chinook, one young man actually blurted out, "That's true, that spot of grass, people are always playing frisbee there." The Calgarian wrestlers all lined up afterwards with their $20 bills, keen for a copy of the book perhaps, but more keen to tell me how much the Bone Cage had for the brief space of my reading taken them home. The animation of this unlikely audience reminds me of my own enthusiastic discovery of Canadian prairie writers and my thrill at learning that good fiction could be made from the kinds of people and places I know so well. Margaret Lawrence and Blair Ross, Carol Shields, that's where I go for experiences of home. It sounds like I am arguing that fictionalization of a place can make that actual place more real. I am. As evidence, I hold up Timothy Taylor's rendering of Stanley Park, Mordecai Richler's version of Schwartz's Deli, Pearl Luke's reimagining of the Alberta Fire Towers, and Elizabeth Hayes' representation of the Mackenzie Valley. This idea of books bringing places to life, giving them multiple dimensions in the minds of many readers excites me. The Project Bookmark goes to those places and marks them with a plaque commemorating the relevant passage from the book. Brilliant. As you can imagine, I love this idea. Then I go on to tell people how they can donate. You can become a page turner for I think it is $20 or something, and then that goes into money to have these plaques coast to coast. So I think that's a really fun idea. And you know, in this time when reading and writing is not the most popular thing, and it's really hard to get people out to library events, it's really hard to get people to buy books, it's just exciting that there are people like Miranda Hill at Project Bookmark and like Amanda and Allegra doing Bear for Books who have so much enthusiasm for new and exciting ways to promote books. So I wanted to tell you about that while I had you captive. But if you have any questions about that or about my books, I'm happy to answer them. One thing I'll tell you, yes?
You mentioned that you didn't name it Fernie, even though it is about Fernie?
Yeah. Why not?
A specific reason?
Yeah, well, for one, maybe I was worried about people being mad at me, but then that was a dumb reason because they were mad at me anyway. It's not very mean. I don't want to make it sound like everyone was pitchforking around my house. Because the funny thing is when it came out, the Mark Medley from National Post and A.J. Summers had a few writers from Ontario said, "Oh my gosh, you're going to get run out of town for this novel." And that was part of my whole paranoia. But in reality, that year at the Grizz Parade, our annual parade, the front float, they had a front float with the mayor and me. They had me on the front float. So they didn't run me into town, they put me on the front of the float. There were very few people who were mad. The reason I called it Colton is I was interested, part of the book is about people naming this place. It's about a relationship with nature. People are drawn to this place because they love nature. But then they all want to own it, and they want to name it, and they want to say what it is and what its future will be, and the rednecks, the hippies, the developers, the ski bums, they all have a different idea, and they all think theirs is the right idea, they own it. And so the idea of it being Colton, the town that was made from coal, is one very important part of the history, and it's a part that people have weird attitudes about, because there's a lot of very environmentally aware people there who are maybe against coal mining and against selenium in the rivers and that kind of thing. On the other hand, once a marketer from Island Lake Lodge said to me, we should rename this place Snow Valley because coal didn't put Fernie on the map, skiing put Fernie on the map. And I said, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard anyone say. If it wasn't for coal, Fernie wouldn't even be on the map. There wouldn't be roads going to it. It would be no place, right? So coal did put Fernie on the map, and coal keeps people there in a good lifestyle. That's where all the money comes from. So I wanted to partly deal with that complex relationship. And then, So that's why, so I named it Colton for that reason, and then also because it is Fernie, but it could just as well be Golden, or Revelstoke, or Whistler, or Nelson, or Rossland. Those towns are very similar, so I wanted people in those places to be able to identify with it.